Okay, so it's hello everybody. I feel much better today because I have good sleep and I did not arrive at 2 a.m. in the morning, so I feel much better. So today I will speak about Langevin dynamics. So that will be the outline of my talk. So we start by recording things on Langevin diffusion and unadjusted Langevin algorithms. And then I will cover two topics, basically, which correspond to two papers which have appeared, so that I've written. So there are many, many other papers, so I will not cite everybody. So if you want to have the full bibliography, it will be included in the paper. So the first paper will appear in Bernoulli, so I gave the reference at the end of the slides. And the second one has appeared in Annals of Applied Probability 2 years ago. And there are many more results which have been appeared since then. So I did not want to review them because I did not have time yesterday afternoon to recapitulate all what has been done by other authors very recently. So it's a funny thing is that this topic is very active in machine learning. So it's for reasons I've explained yesterday. Because high dimensional inference is something which is very important. So sampling in high dimension is something very important. So there are many, many results which have appeared in the machine learning literature. And I think for you, who are probabilists, there are a lot of things to do in this direction because I'm sure that most of the results in machine learning are wrong. So there are a lot of things to do. Okay, so I will explain what we are doing today, but more in more abstract terms. So perhaps. So here I denoted by pi the target distribution I'm willing to sample from. But typically in the problem I will consider pi will be a posterior distribution in a Bayesian setting in a high dimensional space, but for the time being it has not a real, the pi will not be very important the property of pi is important of course, but the nature of pi is not super important. And I will write pi of x that's in this form, so it's exponential of minus u of x, so u of x is minus log pi, and will be called the potential, and so I'm looking to sample a distribution like that. Remember that dimension d typically is very large, and we try to get some idea of how the mixing time depends on the dimension, depending upon the assumption you are ready to make on u. I will use always the assumption that the potential minus log pi equals the potential is L smooth, which means that the gradient of u is Lipschitz. That I will use this assumption without recording it everywhere. So I have written a paper which has appeared in stochastic process application in order to remove this assumption and to have something where you replace a global Lipschitz condition by a local Lipschitz condition, but in that case you need, so you lose the beauty of some results, and also you need to analyze another algorithm. So it's not exactly this algorithm, you need to do some kind of normalization in order to avoid things. So there is a way to release this assumption, but today the potential is assumed to be L smooth, which cover quite a lot of cases, at least which are of interest, at least in machine learning problems. And of course, the idea, so when you are willing to sample this distribution, in fact, there was an idea which was there for a very long time, at least in computational physics literature, is to look at the overdamped Langevin diffusion, which can be written like that. So it's I did not explain why it's overdamped, so I will not explain what is a kinetic. So there are kinetic Langevin and Langevin diffusion, so I will not explain what is a kinetic Langevin. So we may forget what it is overdamped. So we simply look at this SDE, so which is a very simple SDE. So dyt equal minus u of yt dt plus square root of 2 dbt. Of course, if u is a quadratic potential, so if you are sampling a Gaussian distribution, it will be simply an Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process, so it's very, very well known. So in general, of course, because you have assumed that grad of u is globally Lipschitz, this stochastic differential equation has a unique strong solution. And this strong solution happens to be Markovian, so we did not by P of t, so we use this notation all the time. P of t is a semi-group associated to the Langevin diffusion, which is a law of xt, the probability that xt belongs to the set A at time t, given that at time x0, the particle is at x. And what is also known for a very long time is that pi of x, in fact, this semi-group is reversible with respect to pi. So pi is reversible with respect to the semi-group. It's very simple to see. And what you can prove is that pi of x is just a unique invariant probability distribution. So which means, and you need some additional assumption in order the diffusion to be ergodic, so to have. But what you can prove also is that, of course, on some assumption, of course, you have not only you have a unique invariant probability measure, but also the process is ergodic. In discrete setting, it will be more complicated. Yeah, I'm not sure that such thing. I'm not sure that such thing exists. I'm not sure. So there are some extension in there are some extension of diffusion on manifolds. So on manifolds, you can define you replace the gradient by the Beltrami operator on the manifold, and then you derive with respect to the geodesic distance, and then in that case you can make diffusion on manifold. Okay, they are not much work, by the way. So it's an interesting. So this is something I plan to look at is how to do sampling. This is when you want to sample diffusion on manifold. But on a discrete setting, I'm not sure. So you need to define something like what is a gradient in the discrete setting. Yeah. I'm not sure it exists. Yeah. Okay. So what are the main properties? So which are very well known. So without any more assumptions, so you need to have some very weak assumption of the way delta U, the gradient of the potential behaves to infinity. So you converge to zero. So it was known. So from the end of the 50s, basically, you have ergodic theorem, you have CLT, but of course all these results are non-quantitative. So you don't have access. So it's really asymptotic results. So people now want to have some more quantitative description of what happens. And of course, you cannot really sample from diffusion. Right now in machine learning, people think to look at analog computing. So perhaps with analog computer, we can implement directly the diffusion. So it's no kidding. So now people look at, you can perhaps integrate such type of things. So by implementing them in hardware, but for the time being, it's not done like this. So what you do typically, you are in a discrete time world, not in a discrete space world, but in a discrete time world. You simply use Euler-Maruyama scheme. So of course there are other discretization. So I will not discuss. It's possible to use other discretization. For example, when grad of U, the gradient of the potential is not Lipschitz, then you need to do something else because otherwise this typically will not work. Okay, so you will need to use other type of integrators, and of course you can use better integrators than the higher, what is called in applied probability higher order integration. So to have a better discretization of the diffusion. But I will not discuss that today. So it has been more or less considered. Of course, the problem with higher order integration, so just a kind of comment. What is the problem with higher order integration? Higher order integration, typically, the first step is to go to the second order scheme. And second order scheme typically will introduce a kind of Hessian of the potential. And the Hessian of the potential will be d square. So when d is 1 million, d square is about 1 million by 1 million matrix. So you have to invert. So typically it's not super easy to implement. So typically people, and Gerson should have insisted on that, in machine learning, people look at first order method. So it's a first order method, by the way. So in machine learning, there are a lot of, most of the applications today are used gradient techniques and not higher order techniques. Okay, but of course, what you can do is that you can, instead of using a simple step size like this, you can use a modified step size. So you can, for example, modify the step size by the norm of the gradient or something like this. What is typically people do in machine learning, they use Adam or something like this, where the step size is adapted according to some heuristic. But you can do that for diffusion, but I will not comment this today. Okay, so it's a simpler gradient type stuff. And you have a sequence of step size. Yeah? So ZK plus 1 in that case, sorry, is a sequence of ID Gaussian random variable. And the step size gamma k is either a constant step size, so we discussed that, so in many applications people prefer constant step size, or you can use the decreasing step size in order to mitigate the effect of the noise, and in that case gamma k should decrease to 0 at a certain rate. So what you can prove is the following. So you have two types of problems, so which are a bit different. So the problem, what happened in constant step size? So in that case, of course, this recursion defines Markov chain, and we denote by R gamma the Markov kernel associated with this Markov chain. It is not difficult to show that under some conditions related to the behavior of the gradient at infinity, of the gradient of the potential at infinity, this Markov chain is irreducible, that it is positive recurrent, meaning that it has a unique invariant distribution. This unique invariant distribution will depend upon gamma, so it will be a pi indexed by gamma, because it's not, so of course the distribution of the Langevin diffusion is pi, but the diffusion of a discretization will not be exactly pi, okay? And the question which are natural to ask is are the following. So the question of computational complexity, so which is at the heart of the problem in computational science, so where you say, okay, so imagine that I am measuring the distance, the discrepancy between the iterate of the n iterate of the Markov chain starting from x and the stationary distribution pi, not pi gamma, but pi, and I want to have an error which is less than epsilon. So imagine that I want to do that. Well, what is the best choice for the step size and what is the number of iterations in order to be able to guarantee this? So it's linked, of course, with the mixing time in total variation. Okay, so and it really is a quantity which is of interest for a practitioner. So and in particular, is this a knob? So if I say that d is 1 million, so n should be d to the power 4, for example, it means that I should run an algorithm for 10 to the power 6 times 4, so it's 10 to the power 24, so which will be very long. So it's important to know how this quantity depends on the dimension, okay, in order to get such type of guarantee. There is some auxiliary question. So auxiliary question is there a way to choose a starting point x cleverly? So of course it depends on x. So perhaps there is a way to choose x cleverly. So we see that yes, there is a good way to choose x. And an auxiliary question is there a way to quantify? So which is related to that, of course, there is a way to quantify the difference between pi gamma and pi. So that's also a natural question. So is there a way, for example, what is the distance in total variation between pi gamma and pi? Is it of order gamma? Or it depends on dimension and so on. Typically, it will be a point. But there are some results where people don't put a point. They put some distribution which is not random, which is not arbitrary. So there are, in some cases, people look at distribution which are, for example, which are absolutely continuous with respect to pi or something like that. So there are conditions like this. Yeah. No, that's a very interesting question. So yeah. No. So that's a very interesting question. No, lower bounds are very interesting. Yeah. There are some results but very difficult to read for a related problem, which is for volume of convex body, so which is a problem in Vempala did a lot, so he proved that D4 is so you cannot expect to find an algorithm, a Monte Carlo algorithm so when you do lower bound, you have to say what are the rules. So now imagine that you have a source of if you have a source of random random sequence, then what is the number of samples that you need to draw is d to the power 4. When you want to do this to obtain the volume of a convex body. But for this result, there are no lower bound. But it's an interesting question. I think it's important. Okay, so it's that for constant step size. So for decreasing step size. So now, if instead of having constant step size, you want to use decreasing step size. So in that case, xk is no longer an homogeneous Markov chain because the Markov kernel will depend upon the kernel upon the step size gamma. So I will use this notation. So R gamma is a one-step transition kernels, and Q gamma P is the composition of the Markov kernel associated to the different step size. So it's gamma P, then gamma P minus 1 up to gamma 1. And what is EX of fxp? If you take f a bounded measurable function, it would be delta x applied to Q gamma P applied to f. So of course, the same type of question, is there a way to find a sequence such, it's a kind of asymptotic, so is there a way to find a sequence which is such that starting from x, the inhomogeneous sequence of Markov kernel will really converge to pi, okay? It's an asymptotic question, but it's not completely void. So is there a way to guarantee this? So letting the step size go to 0, of course, is there a way, you can hope that at the end of the day, you will converge to 0. And of course, you can ask the same question. So, is there a way to, what is the choice of the sequence, gamma, starting from x in order to get such kind of guarantee? And of course, the auxiliary question is, should we use fixed or decreasing step size? And we see that in fact, the two, for this type of criterion, the two work the same. Okay, so there is no, so it's, then you have to, so at least in rates, so because otherwise the constants are different, but at least in rates, in fact, it's, if this is the guarantee that you are willing to obtain, then the two work the same. Okay. I sample directly this. I sample directly this. So it's very simple. So I have a source of.
My question is, we have chosen a different SDE, not just Langevin.
You can. Yes, you can. You can. There are many. So there is. Of course, there are many diffusion which have the right. So there are many diffusion. Yeah. But this one is good, huh, by the way. By the way, it's good because it's not bad, at least. It's good. It's not bad because it's only first order. Okay, and also it has a constant diffusion term. So when you discretize, it's well known that if the diffusion term would be dependent of xk, in that case you will lose. So it's like Milner. So here it's naturally a first order scheme like this will be of order gamma. Okay, because the diffusion term is constant. If you use, for example, there are many diffusion which have pi as a stationary distribution. You simply have to satisfy pi a equals 0. So there are many. So with the generator of the diffusion, so there are many solutions to this. But in general, you will add a kind of diffusion term which will depend on xk. And when you come to discretization, then it's less good in general. But it has been looked at. Okay, so I will cover first the easiest case, which was a part, because we had a paper with part 1, part 2, but part 1 was rejected in another probability, so it went to Bernoulli, so then so it was delayed, so our nice part 1, part 2 paper has been destroyed by the editors. So he accepts the part 2, but not the part 1. So the part they are published in 2 different journals now, and part 1 was appeared much later than part 2. But still, it's very easy because in the strongly convex case, in the strongly log concave, for strongly log concave distribution, everything is easy to work out, and it's well known because there are a lot of literature on the structure of the geometry of Markov operator in the strongly log concave case. I will not use much of this literature because I use a direct construction there, and then I will discuss super exponential and convex density, so which is where the results are less explicit and relies, in fact, on other results, and we use result in that case which relates from the geometry. We use result which relates to the geometry of Markov operators, and if I have time, I will present some numerical experiments. Okay, so that's the first. The first one is very easy to follow because you can do some very explicit calculation in such case. Okay, so what I assume then is that the potential function u is both L smooth, so there is L square missing there, sorry. So it's L smooth, which means that the gradient is Lipschitz. I put a square because, or remove the square and it's an L, so there is a mistake there. And what I assume is that the potential is also strongly Lipschitz. Okay? And what we will do is, that's the outline of the proof. So I will first try to control, in fact, the distance, the Wasserstein 2 distance between the law of the Langevin diffusion and its discretized version. And the second step of the proof will be to relate W2 to total variation. I will not explain. So there are, in fact, there are connections between the two, which has been, there is a very elegant paper, I will cite it, by Jim Obert, which shows how to relate the two distances. So in the analysis of algorithm, at least there is a way to do many things in W2 and then to prove result in total variation. I will use a slightly different argument, by the way, and I will not give all the details there because there are a lot of details, but just give the feeling of how you relate W2 to total variation. And the techniques we are using is a probabilistic one, so we will use coupling techniques, so both two types of coupling, so synchronous and reflection couplings. But of course, you can do that with, there are many other methods. So we discussed transport theory, so there are many results. So if you know the book by Yvan Gentil, Ledoux, and if you are ready to read 700 pages of difficult math, then I'm sure that you can retrieve these results somewhere hidden, like little gems among these pages, but I think it's not, perhaps in that case, perhaps worth to do that more directly. And of course, when you have a direct proof, like coupling techniques, the good thing with coupling techniques is that in general, the proofs are give you immediately explicit control. So it's more quantitative than in general the result that you can obtain from transport theory, but I'm sure there are a lot of connections. It's very strong. Yeah, of course, it's very strong. But it works in a Gaussian case, for example. Gaussian case, it's okay. So it's like it's like ball-shaped stuff. Yeah, it's very strong. Okay, so what is the coupling technique? So I'm sure that you are all aware about coupling, but just what you do when you do coupling. So when you have two distributions, so which are defined on the set of measure on a set of X being a measurable space, typically it will be a Polish space, and X will be the associated sigma field. What is a coupling is a measure on the product space, which is such that this measure gamma has the good marginal. So it's that you have to satisfy the marginal distribution, and I will denote by C of psi and psi prime the set of coupling associated to gamma. So gamma is the set of coupling of psi and psi prime. And okay, so what is a Wasserstein distance? So we have, when you have a distance d, so assuming that you have X is a Polish space, so it's a metric space in that case, what you call the Wasserstein distance p, it will be, so you take the distance, so it will be x and x prime to the power p, gamma of dx prime, and you take the infimum over the set of coupling. So of course, and when you have p equal 1, so you have discussed Wasserstein-Kantorowicz distance, and there are a lot of, there are much more compared, W1 is much more fancy than the other, the W. So there are much more property for W1 than W2. I will use W2 here in that case, but with the Euclidean distance, but so you are back to Monge-Kantorowicz stuff. So of course, in terms of random variable, what you have to do when you want to bound the Wasserstein distance, but basically you need to find a coupling, so basically x and x prime, so when I say x prime is a couple of random variable, and the joint distribution of this random variable, it's a law of x prime, which belongs to C of psi prime, so of course it's a kind of abuse in notation, but I will admit that it's okay. So which means that as soon as you are, so the good thing when you are willing to build an upper bound for the Wasserstein distance is that if you show any coupling, so you take a coupling, so you construct a coupling, you compute the result, and then it will give you immediately an upper bound. So this is why, in fact, it's a very easy way to proceed. Okay, so we just do an analysis. We start simply by looking at the diffusion itself. So PT, remember that PT is a semigroup of the diffusion. And we look at the Wasserstein 2 distance between delta x PT and delta y PT. And what I will prove, it's a two-line proof, by the way. So this is why, in fact, it's easy. It's a two-line proof, so you have exactly a result like that. And this result means what? It means that you have an exponential convergence of the semi-groove PT in the Wasserstein 2 distance. And the good thing there is that the rate of convergence of this of W2 doesn't depend upon the dimension. It depends simply on M, where M is a constant appearing in the strong convexity condition. Okay, so it's a very in that case it's a very easy result. And the proof is 2 lines, because what you are doing, you are constructing a coupling. And the coupling will be very simple. So you take simply 2 copies of the diffusion, which are driven by the same Brownian motion. So you take a Brownian motion, and then you construct 2 copies of the diffusion with the same Brownian motion. But you know that yt and yt dat are SD, where they are both measurable. Because you have a global Lipschitz condition there, you have two strong solutions which are thus measurable with respect to the sigma field of Bt. So you can simply look at the diffusion which is obtained by by subtracting yt and yt lat. So of course, if you look at the diffusion, it becomes a kind of ODE. It's not an ODE really. It's not really an ODE because it's nevertheless you have you simply have removed the Brownian part. And when you look at, you do a very simple Ito calculus, so you take d of yt lat square, so you obtain this by Ito calculus because you don't have any, you don't have the second order term because you don't have there is no diffusion part there is no Brownian part. And because you are, so you take this, you integrate this quantity with respect from 0 to t, you obtain that, and then because this is exactly, you have the strong convexity constant, so you have this condition is satisfied. So because this condition is satisfied, you can plug it there. So everything is defined P almost surely. So it's P almost surely you have that. Then you use the Grunwald inequality and you obtain that. So you obtain that for a given coupling, which is called a synchronous coupling. Synchronous in the sense that you have coupled the 2 copies of the diffusion on the same Brownian motion. You take the expectation of that, you start from x and y, which are deterministic, and you obtain, and then you obtain the desired result, which means that the W2 distance is given by this. So it's very, very simple in such case. And of course, it has been analyzed by other techniques. You cannot do better. So EMT is good, it's a right. So there is no way to obtain a better thing than M here. You can see that in. So for the case, it's more or less the optimal result, which is not there. Okay, so that's the first type of result. It's very easy. Second type of result will be control, basically another quantity, which is deviation of yt with respect to x star. So what is x star? So you have a u of x. So u of x is strongly convex. So basically, you imagine that u of x is a kind of ball shape. It's like a nice Gaussian type stuff. So of course, it's because it's coercive at infinity, it means that you have, and u of x is smooth, of course, so you have a single minimum. So it's strongly convex, means that you have a single minimum. And of course, what will do the diffusion, if you look what happens, so you start the diffusion from any point, and then you will have a diffusion, it's a ball-shaped potential, so you will more or less go down, and then you will stay around x star. So of course, with excursion, you always visit all the states, but you will spend most of your time around x star, okay? And this is exactly what is written there. So if you start from a given point x, okay, and you run the diffusion at time t, you will have 2 terms. So you have a term which says that the diffusion in the mean, in fact, will converge to x star. So it's a kind of, this part will be removed when t is large. And then you will have a kind of fluctuation part. And the fluctuation part is for further d. And the size, this is where, in fact, look at this d, because this d will give you, in fact, more or less the rate of convergence. This is in later on. So it will be, so which means that the size of fluctuation is d, and that raises a very nice question that you raised yesterday. So in fact, the good question to ask is that in some case, when you know that you want to sample a diffusion process, but you know that you have a lot of components which can be 0 or close to 0, a nice way would be to have the dependence in the dimension, which is not in terms of d, but in terms of what are the number of non-zero coefficients. So sparsity, I don't have any result like that, but of course that would be the nice type of result to obtain. Okay, so for the time being, it's only D, which is not bad, but it's so which means that the fluctuation term is of order, and if you look at the fluctuation of pi, the fluctuation of pi is of order D over M. So in fact, everything, and then it's again, we do the calculation because they are very simple. That was, and then also it gives you the type of tools, because basically it's the type of tools that you use to do calculation. So then when you want to do this, in fact, basically what you will use the generator of the diffusion. And the generator of the diffusion, so remember what is, everybody know what is a generator of the diffusion, I guess, so I will not explain what is it, but it's a, I will say that nevertheless, so it's something like, so you take A of F, will be some, when it is well defined, so it should be when F belongs to the domain of the generator, so F should be a kind of smooth function, and perhaps this smooth function should be F well at infinity. So it will be defined, so it's more or less defined like this. So it will be P of H, F, that you divide by H, okay? So provided that F is smooth enough and that this limit is a well-known limit, so the limit is well defined, so you have, it's C2 and F should have, so it would be okay if you take things like that, so assuming that you have F which goes to 0 at infinity. And what you can prove is that the generator of the diffusion is very simple. It's a Laplacian of F, okay, minus delta U x f of x, the gradient of f of x. So you retrieve the Laplacian of which comes from the Brownian part. Huh? And when you take the function v of x, which is x minus x star, so you remember that delta u of x star is equal to 0 because x star is assumed to be the minimum of the potential. And now you apply, so you just plug the expression of v of x in the generator. So you have to differentiate and to compute the Laplacian of v. When you simply compute the gradient of v, it's 2 times x minus x star, which is written there. And then you have to compute the Laplacian of v, and the Laplacian of v is d. Okay, it would be, so you have a of v of x, which is less than, so now you use a strong convexity. By strong convexity, this is less than m times x minus x star squared, so it's m minus v of x plus d. So you obtain something which looks like, v would be a Lyapunov function in such case for the diffusion. So that's a key relation. And now if you look at VTX is PT of V of X, so you simply the law, so you start from X, and you look at the expectation of V of YT, which is YT minus X star to the square, so you look at this quantity. When you look at what is a partial differential of Vt of X divided by T, so you have to derive this quantity with respect to T, so it would be the limit when h goes to 0 of pt plus h v of x minus pt v of x divided by h. And remember what is the definition of the generator. So it's this case. So it would be pt of a of v of x. Okay, provided that v of x is when it belongs to the domain of the generator, which is the case in that case. And what you obtain is would be, so you just plug this relation. So a of v of x is less than this. You apply pt, so it will be pt of v of x plus 2d. So it's minus 2m vtx plus 2d. Okay, so you have an explicit expression. You have an explicit expression of the way the moments evolve in time. With the generator. Okay, it's a control, so by using the generator, you get a control, in fact, of the way the moment evolves in time. It's exactly like a drift function in discrete time. So it's what I call Foster-Lyapunov drift in discrete time. It's this has exactly the same use, so you use this to control moments. So yeah, then you have this equation, so you know that VTX, so you have this equation, you can use Grunwald inequality there, And using Grunwald inequalities, then you obtain a control of VTX, and you see that you have this control, then you let m goes to infinity, and letting m goes to infinity, yt in that case converge, so you obtain this, and to obtain the second result, what you do, you simply let m goes to infinity, and then the law of ypt converge to pi, so the law of pt converge to pi, so which means that you obtain this result, so you're taking m to infinity, so it will be 0, that will be 0, so it will be of order d over m. So which means that the fluctuation at infinity of the diffusion around x star is of order d over m. So when m is small, it can be very large. When d is large, it can be very large. But it's typically it's exactly this. And in fact, it's more or less tight. So you cannot do much better by any other techniques. Very simple. Now you look at the discrete time process. So this one. And you can do exactly the same. So you look at the discrete time process. So this one, okay. And you can do exactly the same. So you can use a synchronous coupling for the discrete time process, which means that you look at two copies of the Markov chain. It's not longer a diffusion process. You start from x and y, and you look at two copies of this Markov chain, and you look the way the Markov chain evolved in times. And you can do basically the same calculation. Of course, you don't have it's no longer with, there is no longer generator. There is so you do that, it's a bare-end type of result. You have some tricks to do this, but, and you obtain exactly the same type of result. So you obtain, so because here you have, and the quantity which appears, the quantity which appears, I don't think the quantity which appears in discrete time, it's not m, in fact, it's this quantity. It's a kind of, it's m times L divided by m plus L. So it's always a quantity, Gerson should have done that, no? You didn't know that. But when you look at the rate of convergence of gradient type algorithm for strongly convex function, it's exactly the rate that appears in such case. So it's called the condition number. It's slightly different from the discrete time, from the continuous time case, and you have this. Okay, of course, if gamma is constant, you will retrieve something which is geometric there. Okay.
You can't embed the discrete process in the continuous process.
Yeah, you can. Yes, so sometimes we will do that. Yeah. So you can. So you can build, of course, a diffusion. So the discrete time process is a diffusion type process, and you can. In that case, you don't gain much. Huh? In this type of calculation, you don't gain much. But sometimes we will do that later, by the way. So here you do direct calculation, and then you obtain. So it's basically the same result with different constants which appear there. Okay. And you have a W2 convergence, so you converge to pi gamma, of course. So you can prove very easily that in W2 you converge to pi gamma. And then also you have an explicit constant in the dimension. So you see you have an explicit constant in the dimension. There is no, yeah, for the first one there is no dimension there. Yeah, there is no dimension. It's exactly like this. Huh? For the first one you don't have a dependence in the dimension there. It's a completely independent. It's by m, but it's not dependent on dimension. Yeah, this is the first result doesn't depend on the dimension, and this one. The previous result doesn't depend on the dimension. Yeah. This one doesn't depend on the dimension. Yeah. Okay. So now what I will do, but. Okay, so which means that you have, but the calculation are about the same. So it's not exactly the same technique, but it's about if you. So for the contraction, it's exactly the same stuff. So for the contraction, it's basically the same stuff. You have a kind of you use the Grunwald, the discrete time Grunwald inequality, and for the control of the moment, you do basically the same type of stuff. And now what you do is that you have to compute this quantity, which is W2 of delta x q gamma n with respect to pi, to the stationary distribution pi, which is the thing which is of interest. So instead of looking at the convergence of the q gamma n, which is non-stationary, so it will be q gamma n. Q gamma, remember that q gamma is r gamma n, r gamma 1, what I call q gamma. Okay, so you want to see how fast it converges to the stationary distribution pi, and not pi gamma, but pi. And what you will do typically, you will, and this is where you do a kind of comparison between discrete and continuous time, because you will do, okay, you start, so which means that you will start the Markov chain with starting from x, and you propagate this particle with respect to the Markov chain Q gamma, and then you start pi, and you propagate pi with a semi-group P gamma. And what I call gamma n is the sum of step size, because gamma, of course, is a discretization time step, so it's gamma n is the time elapsed from time 1 when you have done n iteration. And once again, to compute this, you will do a synchronous coupling between the diffusion and the interpolation of the Euler discretization. So you will have something like this when you have. So that's when you are on the time when t belongs to the step gamma n and gamma n plus 1. So yt is equal to y gamma n plus this quantity, and the discretization, in fact, it's exactly the same, except for the fact that you have frozen y bar gamma n to the time step gamma n. So this is for the continuous time diffusion. This is the diffusion itself, and this is the interpolation of the diffusion. So basically, it's interpolated in the sense that you have here bt minus b gamma n. And what we will prove is that you will prove that that this distance is bounded by the expectation of this, so you simply have to control this quantity. And you can control this quantity, so basically you control this quantity, so it's because you have to control, I did not reproduce the proof there, but basically you have to do like a telescopic sum, so see what happened on every time interval, and then you obtain a direct control of this quantity, which is given there. And so you obtain a direct control of delta x, q gamma n, and pi, given by this. So the first term is in fact, it gives you the way this quantity goes to 0. Okay, so typically this quantity will go to 0. It's more or less something linked with the initial condition. So it's written there, and then you have a second quantity which doesn't go to 0, which is clear because it doesn't go to 0. Assuming when gamma, I will discuss that later. When gamma is constant, this quantity is exponential, okay, and this quantity will have a limit for a fixed gamma. When gamma now is a sequence which goes to 0, you can opt to make these two quantities goes to 0, okay. But you have for the timing is completely non-asymptotic, and you have an explicit dependence on everything, so on the constant of the model, so kappa, ml divided by m plus l, and also you have an explicit dependence upon the step size, and I did not display this constant, but they have an explicit expression, it's not and then you have also an explicit dependence on the dimension, which is here d, okay? So it's always the dependence is over d L squared divided by n. So you have all these constants are completely explicit, and the calculation I did not show them are quite easy. In fact, you can do a little bit better. You can do more precise calculations, and then you use Ito calculus to do this. So you can do a little bit better if you are ready to assume something more on the Hessian of U, so it's a notation, it's a strange notation for Hessian, sorry, but it's a Hessian of U. If the Hessian of U is also Lipschitz, then you can improve this, and in fact you have a better dependence in the dimension there. So you can improve the dependence in dimension if you are ready to make more assumptions. Okay, so you have an explicit, there are explicit computations, so you can check in the paper, it's not very difficult to do, so it's basically the same argument than before. And then we can try to find the philosophy of this result. So if you start with fixed step size, so if you assume gamma, what you will do is that if you start from x star, so if you start from x star, which is minimum of the potential, you have W2 of delta x star, R gamma p and pi, less than epsilon, and the number of iterations to do is square root of d divided by epsilon, okay, which is completely explicit, and the dependency dimension is square root of D. So the good question, we say, okay, is that optimal or not? I don't know, but it's an optimal result, not today, basically. So this cannot be really improved. And of course, because it's good to start from X star, because if you start from so it's an X star there. If you start from X star, basically it means that this term cancels, which means that you have, of course, a better constant there. And if you have a decreasing step size, so if you have a step size which is of order gamma k minus alpha, and alpha belongs to 0, 1, so there is no the dependence. And then what you will see there is that it's two important results. When you have decreasing step size, you really converge to pi. Everything is controlled there, so it's square root in the dimension, and then you have something which is O of n minus alpha. Yes, perhaps it can be improved in that case by averaging. So I don't know. Perhaps there are better things to do there, but so it's marginally it's n minus alpha, which means that optimal rate is obtained by taking gamma 1 equal k minus 1 over k, which is the rate of stochastic approximation. So it's basically the same type of result. Then what you can prove is that you converge to pi in that case. And these results are tight in the sense that you cannot improve them, in the sense that it's a result that you obtain directly when you take u of x equal 1/2 x squared, because when you take 1/2 x squared, everything becomes it's Ornstein-Uhlenbeck in continuous time, and it's autoregressive process of order 1 for xk, because the gradient of u is linear in that case, so you can do the calculation explicitly. You can prove so that this type, you can prove at least the constants are not perhaps optimal, but they are almost, the constants are almost surely not optimal, because but you cannot do better than that. And these results have been obtained under this condition, not this one, but this condition. The condition that, of course, when u of x is quadratic, of course, this quantity is equal to 0. So you can do the improved result I did not display. Okay, minimum. No, because u is strongly convex. Yeah. Otherwise, it's no. That's the proof. The type of proof becomes more complicated when you don't have because in the strongly convex case you take W2, you do synchronous coupling, and that's it. But otherwise, it's not that simple. Okay, so now we move to total variation. So if you are not willing to get result in W2, but in total variation, which, as I said, is more usual for people working in MCMC, there are some good reasons to do that. So we relate now this result to the result in total variation. So remember, the total variation is also it can be written a bit like it's a coupling distance, of course. So, but so you look at the infimum over the set of coupling of the distribution mu and nu, and you take you look at this quantity, which is the probability that x and y being different. So basically, total variation coupling is you find a coupling which is such that so x should be distributed according to mu, y should be distributed according to nu, and you want that you look at the maximum probability that x is equal to y. Okay, so that's total variation, and what we have obtained is the following thing. It's a result, and I will explain that the feeling. Don't give all the detail because that becomes a bit complicated. So, what is the feeling of this result? So, what we have obtained is a result on PT itself. So, we looked at the total variation distance between PTX and PTY. So, PT is a semigroup of the diffusion, and we have an explicit expression for the total variation distance between this the diffusion process, which is given by that. Okay. So it's 1 minus 2 times phi. Phi is cumulative distributive function of the standard Gaussian distribution. So it's completely explicit, and up to our knowledge, so it's surprising because it's when you have such a striking result, it should have been known. Apparently, it's not known, but it is used. We used a lot reflection coupling, which is tools which have been proposed in a very, very fancy paper by Lindvall and Rogers, which was about, they analyze the convergence of diffusion with coupling, and they use a coupling technique which is known as reflection coupling. And we simply, so our proof, we simply take the Lindvall and Rogers proof with synchronous coupling, and we just apply the result, which was developed for general diffusion, to the case where the diffusion was strongly convex, and then we obtain this type of result. So just to your culture, so what is synchronous coupling? Synchronous coupling is a nice idea. So it's another type of coupling. So instead of coupling, what you will do is that instead of coupling the diffusion with the same Brownian path, what you will do is that you do a reflection. So basically you multiply, so you take BT, so BT is a d-dimensional Brownian motion, I put a d there. D is a dimension. And then you apply your reflection. So provided that xt and yt are not equal, you just reflect the Brownian path around et. So et is the direction of its e of xt minus yt. So you take the two points, xt minus yt, you draw a line, and you reflect the Brownian component around this line. Okay, so it's a reflection under this line. And what you can prove, of course, it's a unitary matrix. So what you can prove is that this quantity is not completely trivial because it depends upon the diffusion. So you have to be careful. So in fact, it's not that simple. But what you can prove is that b tilde t d is also a Brownian motion. Well, it's plausible because this is a unitary matrix. So it's plausible, but then you have to carry out the details because it's before stopping time, so there are some arguments to apply there. So it's not so simple, but it's really proven in Lindvall and Rogers. And because it's a Brownian path, it means that yt has it's really a coupling because it means that it's a Brownian. This is a Brownian part. Okay. And then you have and when you use a synchronous coupling, what will happen is that the thing that will happen is that the two diffusions will stick together. So it's easy to see what happens when you use synchronous coupling. If you use synchronous coupling, what you will do is you start from 2 points, you use the same Brownian path. So because the potential is quadratic, so typically it's strongly convex, the two paths will become closer and closer, but they will never be equal. Okay, they will be very, very close, but they will never be equal. Okay, when you do a synchronous coupling, what you do, you push the two particles to stick. Okay, so the two particles at the end of the day will stick. This is why this coupling is okay for total variation because you will stick the two particles together. And the thing to look at, and which is also the idea for Lindvall and Rogers, I insist, is that when you look at the difference before the coupling time, so the coupling time is before the two particles become equal, they satisfy this type of diffusion, okay? And the funny thing is that this diffusion, of course, is BT1, so it depends on the dimension, but it doesn't longer depend on the dimension. It's a Brownian path because it's easier, because what you have done there is that you have removed basically all the, you removed, so the d-1 dimension is exactly what you do when you do coupling, the total variation coupling of two Gaussians. So when you do total variation coupling of two Gaussians, it will not depend on the dimension because there are d-1 dimensions which can be made equal, basically. So this is exactly what you do. Sorry? I don't understand. Because it's weak in the sense that it's because you have this xt minus yt, so you have to be a little bit more careful. So it's right in it's right in terms of the law are okay. So but it's not a, so we have to be a little bit more careful about the details. It's in the paper, so I will not spend time there, but it's it's finished. 1 minute or. Okay, well, good one. So what you do, you look at this diffusion before coupling time. Formally, what you do is that you look at the diffusion, you integrate this diffusion, okay? You obtain that, okay? ES is XS minus YS divided by its norm. So this is why, because you are strongly convex there, you obtain this, okay? Because it's delta UXS minus delta UYS is ES is XS minus YS divided by its norm, so it will be minus M XS minus YS ds. And the Brownian component of which this time is of dimension 1, because you have this. And you use Grunwald inequality again, and you get a bound of xt minus yt, which is like this. And what you recognize here, so if t is on the event that t is larger than tc, t is smaller than tc, so before coupling time, you have this inequality. So this process is well known. This process is a Nordstein-Uhlenbeck process in dimension 1. Huh? So it's a Nordstein-Uhlenbeck process which is with a drift term. So it's a Nordstein-Uhlenbeck process with ut like that. And so basically, the fact that you have the coupling time, so before the coupling time you have xt minus yt, which is larger than that, which means that ut should be positive. So the probability that tc is larger than t is smaller than the probability that ut is larger than 0. Okay? So for tc being larger than t, it means that ut should be positive all the time, otherwise this quantity cannot be satisfied. So basically, you are back to compute this quantity. You typically are back to bound a quantity like that. Okay, so you need to bound a quantity like that, and so you use it's a heating time of a one-dimensional Nordstein-Uhlenbeck process. So there is a result by that by Borodin and Salminen, for example, but it's known for a very very long time. And you get a stopping time. So basically, it's exactly the argument. So if you all this is exactly the argument of Lindvall and Rogers. So it's but the only difference between Lindvall and Rogers proof and our proof is that we have here we have a bound for this quantity. So we just replace. We have a much better bound because of the strong convexity case, because it's strongly convex. Otherwise, the argument is exactly you can take the argument of Lindvall and Rogers, plug it, and simply replace. You replace. The inequality used in Lindvall and Rogers at that point, you replace it by the strong convexity. Okay, so there is nothing completely fancy there. It's so except the case that you will use strong convexity, and using strong convexity and then Grunwald inequality, you obtain a precise bound. Here it's no. There is no gamma. There it's only for the diffusion. There is no gamma there. There is no gamma. It's for the semi-group of the diffusion. Okay. So for the semi-group of the diffusion, what you obtain therefore like and what is the way? So it's one way to relate Wasserstein and TV, but I invite you to look at our paper. What you do then, so you have this for PTF and PTY. So now it means what? It means that if you take for F a Lipschitz function, okay, then it means that PTF will be Lipschitz, okay? So for any measurable function which is bounded, so PTF will be Lipschitz because it will be the Lipschitz constant will be exactly given by that. So which means that all the arguments now, you can relate TV. So what you will do typically is that you use PT, so you take, when you look at the total variation distance, you take F, which is any bounded function. You use the semi-group of the diffusion PT to smooth PTF and to make it Lipschitz. Then you use duality argument in Kantorowicz for Wasserstein, and then you obtain the result which is given here. So basically there is, so you can really compute the things completely explicitly, so the constant change a little bit. And you obtain basically, you have, when you look at the result, you obtain, you simply have from Wasserstein to TV, you lose the log factor. I'm sure that this log factor can be, if you work hard, the log factor comes from the fact that we use a small part of the, so the technique is that, as I said, I use a small part of the time just to smooth PT of f. So it's a logarithmic in that case. So if you work hard, I think this logarithmic factor should be that. I'm not sure, but I'm almost sure that you can remove them. And so you don't lose much. And there are other techniques. So this is one technique. There is other techniques to relate the two. Okay, so I will conclude there, and I will restart from there next hour. Thanks a lot.
Reflection idea is simply that if I start two Brownian motion, one dimension, one opposite Brownian motion to the other, meet halfway.
They will meet, yeah. And in one dimension, they will stick together. Yeah.
You can do that in any dimension.
Yeah. In any dimension, they will stick. Yeah. If you take two diffusion, with which are ergodic, typically they do the two with this coupling, they will stick together.
So the drift is kind of forced.
Yeah, because the drift. So of course the drift should not be too expanding. So it's better. So the thing is that in this case, in fact, you have condition, of course, on the. You should have diffusion. You should have a kind of coercivity condition. So of course, delta U should not be expanding too much. But it means that this has a tendency to put the trajectory all together and then to stick ultimately. Synchronous, yeah. Yeah, it improves. It improves the constant. Yeah, it doesn't improve the rate, but it improves the constant. Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, that's a good idea. Of course you can use synchronous coupling, and it will sharpen the constant. It will not change. We tried that. It doesn't change dependence in dimension, but the constants are better. Yeah, it's a bit more complicated, but the constants are better. Yeah. So basically, the message there is that there are a lot of results which have been obtained to get. To get the convergence of diffusion. So if you simply use in the simple case where you are strongly convex, then you obtain this type of result. Okay, so that's. Sorry. Yeah. Yes, but implicit. Yes, implicit would be better, of course. So of course, implicit. But typically implicit. For example, in the case where, where you have a potential which is increasing, which is not Lipschitz, okay, but locally Lipschitz, but not globally Lipschitz, which means which is steep. Of course, implicit would be much better, okay. But the cost is very large. The cost of implicit sequence typically is very large. So you want to avoid that in large dimension because to do implicit schemes, you need then to solve. You really need to solve in that case to obtain the next step. So there is a system of equation to solve. So typically, what people do typically is that you are willing to do a better integrator. So when you have steep potential. But you are not willing to go to implicit stuff. So what we do typically, we are using taming. So taming is that we more or less divide, in fact, the step size. When you have a steep potential, you divide the step size by something which is related to the norm of the gradient or the norm of the path of the gradient and things like this. This is what we do, But in theory, of course, it should be better. Yeah. You have better result. For example, if you use better integrator, even here you can use better integrator. You can use integrator of order 2, for example. If you use an integrator of order 2, you will have better result. So it depends. This is why you say what I say. When you say what is a lower bound, so when you compute lower bound, you need to say what is the rule of the game. So if It's a lower bound if I know only how to compute gradient. That's a lower bound if I know if I can compute the Hessian. So it's not only a lower bound per se. It doesn't mean much, but of course there are some results in this direction. Yeah. Okay, so it's time to stop, I think.
Okay, so we'll meet in 10 minutes.
Okay.